Today's reading begins in Judges, chapter 19, starting in verse 1. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, there was a certain Levite living on the farther side of the hill country of Ephraim, who took for himself a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. His concubine played the prostitute against him, and went away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem, Judah, and was there for 4 months. Her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her, to bring her again, having his servant with him and a couple of donkeys. She brought him into her father's house, and when the father of the young lady saw him, he rejoiced to meet him. His father-in-law, the young lady's father, kept him there, and he stayed with him 3 days. So they ate and drank, and stayed there. On the 4th day they got up early in the morning, and he rose up to depart. The young lady's father said to his son-in-law, "Strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and afterward you shall go your way." So they sat down, ate, and drank, both of them together. Then the young lady's father said to the man, "Please be pleased to stay all night, and let your heart be merry." The man rose up to depart, but his father-in-law urged him, and he stayed there again. He arose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart, and the young lady's father said, "Please strengthen your heart and stay until the day declines." And they both ate. When the man rose up to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the young lady's father, said to him, "Behold, now the day draws towards evening. Please stay all night. Behold, the day is ending. Stay here, that your heart may be merry, and tomorrow go on your way early, that you may go home." But the man wouldn't stay that night, but he rose up and went near Jebus, also called Jerusalem. With him were a couple of saddled donkeys. His concubine also was with him. When they were by Jebus, the day was far spent, and the servant said to his master, "Please come and let's enter into the city of the Jebusites, and stay in it." His master said to him, "We won't enter into the city of a foreigner that is not of the children of Israel, but we will pass over to Gibeah." He said to his servant, "Come, and let's draw near to one of these places, and we will lodge in Gibeah or in Ramah." So they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They went over there to go in to stay in Gibeah. He went in and sat down in the street of the city, for there was no one who took them into his house to stay. Behold, an old man came from his work out of the field at evening. Now the man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he lived in Gibeah, but the men of the place were Benjaminites. He lifted up his eyes, and saw the wayfaring man in the street of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going? Where did you come from?" He said to him, "We are passing from Bethlehem, Judah, to the farther side of the hill country of Ephraim. I am from there, and I went to Bethlehem, Judah. I am going to the Lord's house, and there is no one who has taken me into his house. Yet there is both straw and feed for our donkeys, and there is bread and wine also for me, and for your servant, and for the young man who is with your servants. There is no lack of anything." The old man said, "Peace be to you. Just let me supply all your needs, but don't sleep in the street." So he brought him into his house, and gave the donkeys fodder. Then they washed their feet, and ate and drank. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain wicked fellows, surrounded the house, beating at the door. And they spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we can have sex with him." The man, the master of the house, went out to them, and said to them, "No, my brothers, please don't act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, don't do this folly. Behold, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out now. Humble them, and do with them what seems good to you, but to this man don't do any such folly." But the men wouldn't listen to him. So the man grabbed his concubine, and brought her out to them, and they had sex with her, and abused her all night until the morning. When the day began to dawn, they let her go. Then the woman came in the dawning of the day, and fell down at the door of the man's house where her lord was, until it was light. Her lord rose up in the morning, and opened the doors of the house, and went out to go his way. And behold, the woman his concubine had fallen down at the door of the house, with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, and let's get going." But no one answered. Then he took her up on the donkey, and the man rose up and went to his place. When he had come into his house, he took a knife and cut up his concubine, and divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the borders of Israel. It was so that all who saw it said, "Such a deed has not been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak." Then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was assembled as one man, from Dan even to Beersheba, with the land of Gilead, to the Lord at Mizpah. The chiefs of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 footmen who drew the sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. The children of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this wickedness happen?" The Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered, "I came into Gibeah that belongs to Benjamin, I and my concubine, to spend the night. The men of Gibeon rose up against me, and surrounded the house by night. They intended to kill me, and they raped my concubine, and she is dead. I took my concubine and cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and folly in Israel. Behold, you children of Israel, all of you, give here your advice and counsel." All the people arose as one man, saying, "None of us will go to his tent, neither will any of us turn to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot, and we will take 10 men of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 out of 10,000 to get food for the people, that they may do, when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, according to all the folly that the men of Gibeah have done in Israel." So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, knit together as one man. The tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What wickedness is this that has happened amongst you? Now therefore deliver up the men, the wicked fellows who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death, and put away evil from Israel." But Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the children of Israel. The children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities to Gibeah, to go out to battle against the children of Israel. The children of Benjamin were counted on that day out of the cities 26,000 men who drew the sword, in addition to the inhabitants of Gibeah, who were counted 700 chosen men. Amongst all these soldiers there were 700 chosen men who were left-handed. Every one of them could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. The men of Israel, besides Benjamin, were counted 400,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of war. The children of Israel arose, went up to Bethel, and asked counsel of God. They asked, "Who shall go up for us first to battle against the children of Benjamin?" The Lord said, "Judah first." The children of Israel rose up in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. The men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel set the battle in array against them at Gibeah. The children of Benjamin came out of Gibeah, and on that day destroyed 22,000 of the Israelite men down to the ground. The people, the men of Israel, encouraged themselves, and set the battle again in array in the place where they set themselves in array the first day. The children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until evening. And they asked of the Lord, saying, "Shall I again draw near to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother?" The Lord said, "Go up against him." The children of Israel came near against the children of Benjamin the second day. Benjamin went out against them out of Gibeah the second day, and destroyed down to the ground of the children of Israel again 18,000 men. All these drew the sword. Then all the children of Israel and all the people went up, and came to Bethel, and wept, and sat there before the Lord, and fasted that day until evening. Then they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. The children of Israel asked the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, "Shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of Benjamin my brother, or shall I cease?" The Lord said, "Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver him into your hand." Israel set ambushes all around Gibeah. The children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the third day, and set themselves in array against Gibeah, as at other times. The children of Benjamin went out against the people, and were drawn away from the city, and they began to strike and kill of the people, as at other times, in the highways, of which one goes up to Bethel and the other to Gibeah, in the field, about 30 men of Israel. The children of Benjamin said, "They are struck down before us, as at the first." But the children of Israel said, "Let's flee, and draw them away from the city to the highways." All the men of Israel rose up out of their place and set themselves in array at Baal Tamar. Then the ambushers of Israel broke out of their place, even out of Marah-Geba. 10,000 chosen men out of all Israel came over against Gibeah, and the battle was severe, but they didn't know that disaster was close to them. The Lord struck Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel destroyed of Benjamin that day 25,100 men. All these drew the sword. So the children of Benjamin saw that they were struck, for the men of Israel yielded to Benjamin, because they trusted the ambushers whom they had set against Gibeah. The ambushers hurried and rushed on Gibeah. Then the ambushers spread out, and struck all the city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed sign between the men of Israel and the ambushers was that they should make a great cloud of smoke rise up out of the city. The men of Israel turned in the battle, and Benjamin began to strike and kill of the men of Israel about 30 persons. For they said, "Surely they are struck down before us, as in the first battle." But when the cloud began to arise up out of the city in a pillar of smoke, the Benjaminites looked behind them, and behold, the whole city went up in smoke to the sky. The men of Israel turned, and the men of Benjamin were dismayed, for they saw that disaster had come on them. Therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel to the way of the wilderness, but the battle followed hard after them, and those who came out of the cities destroyed them in the middle of it. They surrounded the Benjaminites, chased them, and trod them down at their resting place, as far as near Gibeah towards the sunrise. 18,000 men of Benjamin fell. All these were men of valor. They turned and fled towards the wilderness, to the rock of Rimmon. They gleaned 5,000 men of them in the highways, and followed hard after them to Gidom, and struck 2,000 men of them, so that all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled towards the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and stayed in the rock of Rimmon 4 months. The men of Israel turned again to the children of Benjamin, and struck them with the edge of the sword, including the entire city, the livestock, and all that they found. Moreover, they set all the cities which they found on fire. The Gospel of John, chapter 3, starting in verse 22. After these things, Jesus came with his disciples into the land of Judea. He stayed there with them and baptized. John also was baptizing in Enon near Salem, because there was much water there. They came and were baptized, for John was not yet thrown into prison. Therefore a dispute arose on the part of John's disciples with some Jews about purification. They came to John and said to him, "Rabbi, he who is with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have testified, behold, he baptizes, and everyone is coming to him." John answered, "A man can receive nothing unless it has been given him from heaven. You yourselves testified that I said, 'I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him.' He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom, who stands and hears him, rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. Therefore my joy is made full. He must increase, but I must decrease. He who comes from above is above all. He who is from the earth belongs to the earth, and speaks of the earth. He who comes from heaven is above all. What he has seen and heard, of that he testifies, and no one receives his witness. He who has received his witness has set his seal to this, that God is true. For he whom God has sent speaks the words of God, for God gives the Spirit without measure. The Father loves the Son, and has given all things into his hand. One who believes in the Son has eternal life, but one who disobeys the Son won't see life, but the wrath of God remains on him." Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself didn't baptize, but his disciples, he left Judea and entered into Galilee. Psalm 104, beginning in verse 25. There is the sea, great and wide, in which are innumerable living things, both small and large animals. There the ships go, and Leviathan, whom you formed to play there. These all wait for you, that you may give them their food in due season. You give to them, they gather. You open your hand, they are satisfied with good. You hide your face, they are troubled. You take away their breath, they die and return to the dust. You send out your Spirit, and they are created. You renew the face of the ground. Let the Lord's glory endure forever. Let the Lord rejoice in his works. He looks at the earth, and it trembles. He touches the mountains, and they smoke. I will sing to the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have any being. Let my meditation be sweet to him. I will rejoice in the Lord. Let sinners be consumed out of the earth. Let the wicked be no more. Bless the Lord, my soul. Praise the Lord. Proverbs chapter 14, starting in verse 22. Don't they go astray who plot evil, but love and faithfulness belong to those who plan good. In all hard work there is profit, but the talk of the lips leads only to poverty.